Fredericksburg, the Wilderness, Spotsylvania Courthouse, Chancellorsville. Within just a few dozen miles of one another in central Virginia, these soils ran red during the American Civil War as Confederate and Union armies met, and their soldiers fought, killed, and died by thousands, in numbers that would not be replicated until the Great War, a half-century later. They came here from as far away as New York, Georgia, many of them still but teenagers. Several had never been but a few miles from home before they were marched hundreds of miles in 1862. This is far and away the most costly ground in the most costly war this country has ever seen on its own soil. It's almost difficult to imagine that young men were literally dying by the thousands, sometimes in minutes. It was still early in the war, barely a year after cannons raided brimstone upon Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor. General Lee and his fellow commanders were seeking a decisive victory at the little town of Fredericksburg on the Rappahannock River, Virginia. In 1862, there were barely 5,000 people living in Fredericksburg, a humble port on the Rappahannock River and part of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. George Washington grew up just across the river, and the town would later adopt his mother's name, Mary Washington, for its local university. In the 1860s, the people living here were but simple farmers and tradesmen, preachers, millers, and thousands of enslaved African Americans working without pay. The battle for Fredericksburg was vicious and callous. As Union armies approached from the north, they rained cannon fire on this town of a few thousand civilians, destroying homes, businesses, and churches. Yet somehow the steeple of St. George Episcopal Chapel, a signpost of this colonial town, survived the hellscape. Meanwhile, on the south side of the river, Confederate sharpshooters took out Northern enemies, placing pontoon bridges on the placid Rappahannock River. All too quickly, the battle became one of attrition. Civilians fled by the thousands, fearful of Abraham Lincoln's forces, who helped themselves to all that was left behind and claimed it as war booty. While the war had ostensibly started out over such amorphous concepts as states' rights and arguments over taxes, before long the conflict would be waged to banish slavery from the American firmament forever. This statue is of Richard Kirkland, who was a volunteer Confederate soldier from South Carolina. During the Battle of Fredericksburg, he came over the top of the Confederate lines, down the hill with his canteen, and ministered to Union casualties. And when the Union soldiers realized what he was doing, they stopped firing. They halted all firing as Kirkland gave water to Union soldiers, earning his nickname, the Angel of Marie's Heights. And he was tragically killed in Georgia not too long after the Battle of Fredericksburg. Young men by the thousands joined up to heed the battle cry to war. North and South were as divided along ideological as they were geographic lines. Families with members living hundreds, or sometimes even but a few miles apart, found themselves on opposite sides. And so it would come to pass at Fredericksburg that the unfortunate motto of brother against brother would be realized and written in blood.